Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today we have a new guest to the show, and his name is Jason Hardrath. He is a physical educator by trade who has climbed his way to the Pacific Nortwest mountaineering history by scaling all of Washington's 100 tallest peaks in just 50 days, 23 hours, and 43 minutes. This list of 100 peaks, commonly referred to as the Bulger List, has only been completed by 84 people. Most who complete the list, which was created in 1980, take 4 to 10 or more years to complete it. The previous speed record had been 1 year, 1 month, 15 days before Hardrath blew that apart by doing the entire challenge in less than 2 months. So Jason, without further ado, it is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh man, I'm really excited to be on. I love the premise, just the name of your show, the Living Your Greatness. I mean, that's the whole motivation behind me doing these crazy undertakings, is this idea that I'm just some kid from some small town. And if I can go out and do this type of stuff, then anybody can find their greatness and go out and live some wild, unbelievable dream. So I'm stoked to be here.
Absolutely. And you know what? We are thrilled to have you on. Again, such cool, inspiring story there, just kind of in your bio. But Jason, let's kind of get kicking off here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up in the United States? And what inspired you to become a physical education teacher? And how would your parents also describe you?
Some big questions there. All right, let's start with geography. So I grew up in northeastern Oregon, on the West Coast, out in kind of a high desert land area called Baker City. Nice historic little town, historic downtown, kind of an old West sort of feel still to it. And kind of grew up with, it's a bit of an agriculture town. So getting in the outdoors for hunting, fishing, and motorsports is the normal. But I was an ADHD little kid, couldn't sit still. Moving my body was very important. So over the course of getting involved in sports and growing up kind of doing that as an outlet, as a form of like building an identity and as a way of expressing just this desire to move and push my body, eventually connected the two, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go out and push my body in these outdoor spaces. So that's kind of a 300,000 foot flyover of that journey of my life and where I grew up. I kind of became aware that I was going to be some kind of an educator at a pretty young age, kind of had that peg, because I was this person that whenever I would learn a skill, I would want to help others learn it. I wasn't like now I'm going to use this to have power over you and brag and show how much better than you I am. It's like, if I learned it, I wanted to help others learn it. And so from a very young age, kind of pegged that was something I was going to do something with. And teacher was just like the easy, low-hanging fruit for how to express that sort of a drive. And then I had a few experiences, again, like ADHD kind of making me driven to move my body. I became a student of my sports as a runner and a student of like the health things that are a part of being a healthy athlete. So it became very natural to be like, oh, I could be a PE teacher. I could be a physical educator. As an expression of this desire to help people forward and this natural passion I have for what I'm doing in my own life and like blending those two. And then I had a couple of formative experiences with PE teachers. One of them is a phrase, a structure I would never repeat, but in middle school, I had a PE teacher that like there was a kid being lazy and he was like, oh, come on, Hardrath runs the mile in the time you run the 600, because those were the two timed distances we did. And I remember in that moment, like feeling kind of glorified and feeling like lifted up, like, oh, this hard work, it pays off. But, now as a teacher, I'm like, oh man, how did that other kid turn out, like being on the other end of that? So I'd never repeat it, but I remember in that moment being like, oh, hey, wow, like I'm getting recognition here. And a lot of other places, I'm the kid that messes up and does something impulsive and gets in trouble. But here in PE, it's like I'm getting talked up for what I do. And then another one in high school later on, there was a teacher that had just started a fitness class where the premise of the class was you build your own sort of fitness program, and then you do it, you execute it during class time. And I had gotten into running and was a student of my sport at this point. And so like I was legit 100% in, like I was doing tempo workouts and speed workouts and, supportive like strength training and like hitting it hard for this class. And I remember one day he's riding his bike as I'm running a tempo run at like 6 whatever mile pace. And he comes up next to me. He's like, "Hardrath, you're a man amongst boys. I'm setting my grade book off of you." And I remember kind of just being like, yeah. And also that sucks for everybody else. And so those kind of positive experiences in the PE environment made it, acted as anchoring memories for like, oh, I want to create positive experiences for kids in that same domain. And as far as my parents, I would say my mom would say I was difficult to parent, but very lovable, kind, caring, wore my heart on my sleeve, very, very emotionally expressive kid growing up, a bit troubled, but kind of was able to integrate that and work that out as I figured stuff out growing up.
Thanks for giving that little bit of background, about yourself, and also sharing those highlights, and kind of successes that truly did have an impact in terms of the future of kind of your life, right? Of kind of now being the physical educator yourself. You are a runner, a triathlete, and a climber. Those were, I know, the 3 main sports that you were strong at. How did these sports come into your life?
So running became my first love, if you will. Well, I guess I should say skating was before. Then in middle school, I took a crash on rollerblades, doing some high-speed downhill skating in the middle of the night. Totally dangerous. Yeah. Anyways, broke my wrist, and my parents had gotten sick of me like sneaking out of the house to go skate all day anyways. So they were like, no more skating. And I luckily found the transition into running and started setting running goals. Was the only kid my 8th grade year to break the 6-minute mile in PE. And like, I remember just being consumed with that goal and crossing the finish line and hearing 5:57. And the only part of it that mattered, that triggered the celebration, was hearing that 5. Like none of the rest mattered, just 5 at the front end of what the teacher read. And that feeling flopping onto the grass, just feeling totally burned, just on fire from a hard effort, but also like it was totally worth it. Like I did it. And that solidified this like goal-oriented mindset, especially around physical pursuits in my mind. And so I joined track and, set goals to make it onto the varsity in high school, and then make it to state, and then make it onto a college team. And then just kept setting bigger goals, which led to marathons and Ironman triathlon, and then trying to make it to the world championships in Ironman triathlon. And then climbing actually came later because I got in a big car accident. I was ejected from a vehicle in a rollover accident in 2015, which kind of put a big question mark into my running and my triathlon career. One of the first doctors I had is like, "Oh yeah, you're just gonna have to let that part of your life go," because I was pretty messed up. And fought my way through that. And one of the ways I fought through was I took up hiking, and hiking hills led to mountains, and mountains led to bigger mountains. Pretty soon I was running into mountains that had highly technical summit pinnacles. And I was like, well, guess I need to be a rock climber now, because I don't want to get turned around by a mountain, because I like to succeed at things. And so took up rock climbing, started building those skills, brought the same mindset that I used to pull through all those years of progress in endurance sport to build climbing strength and climbing skills. And so managed to master a great deal of it in a matter of about 2 years. And over the course of those 2 years, my running started to come back. I still don't run like I used to. But it came back enough that I could go out and like slog through a 20 or a 30 or a 40-mile day and not have my knee act up and not have, my ribs or my back act up. And it's like, all right, even though I'm not that fast, like now I can go out and link together these huge mountain link ups. And just started blending both worlds and fell in love with it.
Absolutely. And you know what? I just want to comment here, like getting into a car accident like that is a big deal, right? For most people, they'll get discouraged. It's a setback. I think you were also told, even from your doctor, like you might not be able to run again and drop these activities. Something that you had mentioned is the power of goal setting, right? And having that mindset, that growth mindset, and setting goals and believing in yourself too, which is pretty amazing. But why do you think this lifestyle change that you made, going from marathons and Ironmans, then switching to mountains, why do you think this has had such an impact on your life?
When you face something that has been a huge part of you and you face losing it and you get told by others, and I mean, part of growing up the way I grew up is, I wasn't the kid that was supposed to succeed. A lot of adults thought I was just a bad apple because, impulsive behaviors, unable to like inhibit that. So, I can remember one time I got picked on by a bunch of older kids. They were picking up little pebbles and would just toss them. And they were older and more skilled than me. And so they could toss them and hit me like right in the head or right in the face. And like, I didn't have those skills. I was just like a kid at this point, like still elementary school. And so there's nothing I could really do to get back at them. And they were sneaky enough that they would get away with it. And I remember just like finally losing it and grabbing a handful of rocks and just hurling it in like this sidearm sort of motion and just scattering them across the side of this person's new van at my church. And the person was furious. And so, like they don't see what was done to me. They see my reaction to the situation. And so like, they kind of had me pegged as like this kid that wasn't going to turn out well. And it's like, you don't know who I am and you don't know what I'm going to do. And you don't know how passionate and how hard I'm willing to work. And I mean, that's sort of part of the goal setting mindset, right? Is you're willing to endure more discomfort now for a bigger payout later. Like that's a fundamental understanding is you believe in that process. And so if you've practiced this and you've endured increasing levels of discomfort in the now as you progress through your training to pursue marathons or Ironmans or 5Ks, whatever it is, you've repetitively lived this process and seen the results. Like facing the car accident, it was a matter of doing some identity work, right? Like realizing the phrase, I am a triathlete, like that's not how it is. It's like, I'm a passionate, driven person, and I choose to express that through triathlon. That's the more accurate depiction. And once you understand like that's how the picture works, then you understand like I can say something like, oh yeah, if I lost my legs in that car accident, I would have bought a racing wheelchair and you would know me as a wheelchair racer right now. Like I would still be driven and I would still love choosing physical venues to express that driven nature, regardless of what it is. And so when you understand those drives and you understand yourself on that level and you understand the process of I'm going to endure discomfort, like I sucked at rock climbing when I first started, right? Like it triggered all sorts of self-consciousness in me because I was literally the worst person in my climbing gym for months. Like there were kids climbing harder stuff than me. Because all of my endurance training, I let my upper body diminish as much as possible to be as light as possible to perform at these endurance races. So I'd never trained upper body. I couldn't grab onto the holds that some kids could climb on easy. And so had to endure sucking at something new and all the feelings that come along with knowing you suck. And being able to release that and just play and just do the work and believe in the work until I became one of the people. I can remember the first day where someone's like, oh, how do you do that? What do you do to get strong like that, to climb that? And it was like, oh, wait, I've become a person at the gym that someone's asking a question of. Like I've crossed a line today. Like I've at least gotten to the point that someone thinks I'm good. And you've got to endure a lot of uncomfortable feelings. You've got to be able to abide with those. You got to be able to be okay and just live in that. And, kindergartners, they have it lucky, right? Like they don't have this self-critical concept yet. You hand them a basketball, they'll miss 1,000 times and be no less enthusiastic about throwing that basketball again. Somewhere along the way, we pick up this like self-criticism where it's like, oh, if I try twice and I'm not good, it must not be meant for me. That fixed mindset instead of that growth mindset. We lose that sense of play and exploration, and we think we should just be able to perform. We should be able to get results. And that's why you do something, is to get results rather than just to have the experience and to go through the process. And, that's what this car accident really taught me, was we never own anything. Like that phrase I said, I am a triathlete, or I am a world championship qualifier. It's like, that's like in a snap of the fingers, that's gone. It's over. And we lose track of that so easily. And then it causes this massive disruption when something unexpected happens. But all we ever have is our practice. All we ever have is our process. And it's like that old quote, you can love your labor, but you can't love the fruits of your labor, right? Because nothing is promised. And so we need to just love our process. We need to go back to being in love with the play, with the exploration, with the simple components that lead to the results, rather than just being like, oh, I do this because I win races, or I do this because I set records. It's like, no, I climb rocks because I love the moments I'm alive climbing rocks. And that's why I do these. And it's just because I've continued to practice it that now I've done this thing where I've climbed 100 mountains in 50 days.
Absolutely. And you know what? You brought up a lot of really great points there, from growth mindset, and then just a way that you even used just words of like affirmation, right? Too, of describing, right, the person that you want to be, or the person that you want to continue to become, right? And how much of an impact that has. So I definitely really appreciate that. And I'm sure all our listeners hear that too, because it's something that we can apply not even just in kind of fitness here, but even all areas of our life, right? With work, with if you're someone into photography or cooking, and so many aspects. So that's awesome. And I love even the fact that you even said, you got to suck a lot at the start, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. So the next question I want to dive into here is, you had an incredible journey to 100. You just spoke about that at the end there, but why was this journey so important to you? And if you could just tell us a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. So the journey to 100 actually refers to a bigger process than just these 100 mountains. Over the last 3 years of my life, I discovered fastest known times. There's a website, fastestknowntime.com. For those that haven't seen it, it's fun to go peruse some of the different routes and trails and mountains that have these records held, that are substantiated by GPS data and photo evidence. So that basically you can race in a place that like no event could ever host a race because it's too high risk, or it's too big, or it goes through a wilderness area that's closed to those sorts of events. But as an individual, you can go through there and you can race against every person who's bothered to go through there and time themselves that we have on record, which is, the nod of fastest known time. Like maybe someone exists in history that did it faster, but we don't know. And that's why the record has its name. But like I said, I fell in love with doing these big pushes on technical peaks. And I discovered fastest known times, and it was like, this is the perfect fit. The reason I want to do fastest known times is because I already love the lifestyle of doing them. And that led to the idea of like, oh, no one's ever done 100 different FKTs. I'm going to be the first person to do 100 FKTs. And the rationale behind it, as silly as that is, right? Like how silly is it to just choose the number 100, other than us humans seem to love big round numbers. But the thought was, I'll have 100 different memories, 100 different experiences of pushing my body in some of the most beautiful spaces in this country that I grew up in. And like, that will be a part of my story that I've lived if I succeed at this. And so it was worth pursuing, because it's like, well, that's the life I would want to live anyway. So I might as well like chase some records and have added motivation to get out in new areas, to create some of my own routes and repeat great routes that others have created. And so I started this journey to be the first person to do 100 different FKT records. And as I started approaching number 100, people started asking the question, because, people started paying attention, and they started asking, well, what are you going to do for number 100? That's kind of a big deal. And I was like, again, since I was just in it, doing it because I loved it, I hadn't really thought about it as like, well, what sort of a show am I putting on? It's like, I'm just doing what I love. But it was like, oh, maybe I should do something kind of like rad and significant and celebratory for number 100. And I'd heard of the Washington Bulgers much, much earlier, like when I still only had 30. And I was like, oh, that record could get beat, but didn't think I would be the one to go after it. And suddenly it came across my radar again. And I was like, wait, 100 peaks with technical 5th class rock climbing and bushwhacking and orienteering and glacier travel, all the things I've done in previous FKTs, but lumped together in this continuous 100 mountain push. That seemed like, as a teacher, right, we think about what's a good cumulative exam, what's a good final examination. It's like, holy crap, this is it. And then the poetic nature of 100 peaks for the 100th FKT, it made it too good to be true. So I was like, all right, I have to at least try to make this heinous dream into a reality.
And how did you know that 100 peaks was possible to complete?
Obviously, there was a huge amount of fear and unsureness when you approach a goal of this. There's so many things that can go wrong, right? Like one fire breaks out in a wilderness area, they shut it down, boom, it's over. You can't access a few of the peaks, the whole list is over. So like there's these fears that even if I do everything right, this thing in the snap of a fingers, one lightning strike could be over. And you have to be willing to abide, again, back to that abiding with the discomfort, abiding with the unsureness. And like I'd practiced that already. And so I was like, okay, I'm willing to put that risk on the line, that I could have 3 peaks left to go and a lightning strike could end it all. But then planning on the front end, and that's really my recommendation to anyone, right? With anything you think is big and scary, like some goal you think maybe you can do, start putting the pen to the paper, start going through the planning process. Because either you're going to get sort of this gut instinct increase in motivation, which is your mind and body, your soul, if you will, telling you this is possible for me. Like this could actually go. Or you're going to get this like sinking of your motivation. And maybe you're going to get an epiphany of what it is that you're not ready for yet. Or that makes the project not right for you. And I think that sort of pen to the paper is where we create that sort of like, okay, yeah, this is building the momentum and I should go, or yeah, no, this isn't the right answer. And as I started that process, I started having conversations with other mountaineers in the Pacific Northwest who'd climb these peaks. I started building a map, pulling in GPX files, pulling in data, pulling in trip reports on these different peaks and what ways they could and couldn't be linked up to be as efficient as possible. I started looking at how I could have my support crew do things that no one had ever done before to make lines even more efficient. And the more I looked into it, the more it was like, wait, this can go. Like I have an 80-day window for my summer as a teacher. And this is starting to look like it can fit in that 80-day window. And maybe even like I can have enough of a margin that even if something goes wrong, I could still finish this thing before I have to go back to school. And so the motivation just increased and increased and increased to go try to actualize this thing. Even though a lot of people are like, the previous record's 410 days. Like there's no way you're going to do this thing that you're saying you're going to do. There's no way. Like there's a bunch of people betting on my failure, and a handful of people that were like, yeah, he's going to do this because they've kind of seen what I'd done before, and they're like, this can go. And so it's kind of fun to like both have that like cheer squad that was all in from the beginning, but also those people that slowly over the course of the thing got moved from the he's not going to do it camp to the this is amazing camp. And it was really, really fun to like get to live that experience of like moving people from the critic and the doubter into the like, oh my God, finish it. So yeah, I would say that's the big part is the planning. I put about 6 months of intensive planning into the front end of this, to know all of my routes and all of my link ups and all of my entry exit points and resupply points, on the front end, which no one had ever done with this before. And so I got a result that no one had ever gotten. Yeah, I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
Thanks for giving us that background of, when anyone's creating any goal, is making sure that it's realistic, right? So, you put in the work, you put in the research, and you were pretty confident that, hey, this can be done, kind of like you said. Jason, are there any other FKT athletes who are doing anything similar to this right now?
Yeah, a really interesting one that happened in Colorado. And again, like Colorado and Washington's mountains are significantly different with significantly different infrastructure. I mean, the North Cascades are some of the most rugged, inaccessible mountains in the 48 states. And a lot of the Colorado mountains are much more accessible. Washington is considered a temperate rainforest. So it's extremely thick vegetation. And Colorado is a bit different, but still there's people in Colorado who are rattling off the centennials in 22 days. I'm going to space on his name, Andrew. Andrew's his first name. I'm spacing on his last name. He did the centennials there this year. A guy named Paul, again, spacing on the last name. He did a through hike, like a self-supported through hike where he didn't get in any vehicles of the 58 14ers in Colorado this year. And then I happen to know a couple of young guys, Travis Soares and Nathan Longhurst. Nathan Longhurst is the kid that became the youngest person to finish the Bulger List after he climbed 65 of them with me as my climbing partner. And he went on to like finish up the rest of them and become the youngest person to finish the whole 100 list. They're gearing up to this next year, potentially try the entire SPS list, which is the Sierra peak section list of 247 peaks. And they're hoping to finish it in a single climbing season, which will be the first time that's ever been done with those peaks. So I'm really excited. I'm actually like supporting them and helping them do logistics. I'd really love to see that huge project come through. And I might even join them if we can figure out that it fits into the 80 days of my school summer. That's kind of my limitation. They're both young and they're kind of like living out of their vehicle and just chasing their dreams at this phase of life. And so they have a wider time window to make this thing happen. I'm like, kind of a cool time of life, guys. You could do something really rad here. So I'm definitely stoked to see them continue to grow that idea and put the pen to the paper on building out how they're going to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, those other individuals that are doing some really cool things. I had never heard of this world of a whole FKT athlete, and it's just fascinating. And I do a lot of hiking myself, and now it's motivating me to kind of look more into this stuff. So Jason, Olympic athletes like Michael Phelps have spoken a lot about, post-depression moments that athletes feel after they achieve a big goal. So have you ever experienced this before? Because, you've shared with us some pretty amazing accomplishments. And if so, how did you overcome this experience?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you do something that creates, and Andrew Huberman from Stanford, he's an amazing speaker on this. Anytime you do something that creates a peak dopamine experience, you're going to be below your baseline for a certain amount of time afterwards. And I think anytime you pursue big goals, regardless of what those goals are, physical or otherwise, and you have a big success, you have to be ready to abide the low on the other end. Hand in hand with that, though, I think some of the way you mitigate some of the existential turmoil that can come along with that, like, oh, now it's done and I'm not still at a heightened state. I'm feeling low. Like, what was it even worth? Some of the way you stave that off and mitigate that is, I think the human journey, the human adventure journey, is always meant to be one of going out and then returning with a greater wisdom and a greater value to your community because you endured what the adventure took to endure. And so I think something that's gone hand in hand for me is the fact that I am a physical education teacher. And anytime I go out and do these big things, there's always this understanding that I'm coming back to my students with increased stoke and excitement for what's possible in the world, with more stories, with more wisdom, with more information to tell them about what's out there in the world. And that act of giving back and building your position in the community as one who can add value and has relevance and can help people, that I think is the key to like really navigating the lows after these big undertakings, is that you're supposed to, get off the dopamine wave and work more on the serotonin and oxytocin, those chemicals in our brain that are related to relationship and position in our communities. And I think that's one of the keys for sort of like not having, like a really negative post adventure experience, is to make sure that it's like, okay, I'm doing this big thing and it can be totally for me. Like my motivations can be very personal and that's perfectly fine. But also beyond that, is there some good that I can do for the people around me because I'm going to go and have the courage to face this adventure? And that's going to create a much more human, a much more complete experience for whoever's pursuing it.
And I think that right there starts with a mindset approach, right? Having that mindset of again, shifting like, okay, it's not all about the success of hitting my goal. It's also about maybe the lifestyle that I'm living, whether I'm doing this all out in my summers or whether I'm doing this only on my weekends. So I think it's really about the lifestyle. I think it's an important lesson there from everything that I heard is if you're able to embrace it as part of you, then it's never really going away, even when that journey has kind of leveled down.
Absolutely. And I think that that's true on a different level than what I just explained as well, is that you can kind of stave off some of the like dopamine crash if you're not all about the finishing, right? Like I think I mentioned earlier in our talk, it can't just be like in this 100 mountain effort. Like it was never about finishing the last mountain. Even when I was on the last mountain, it was still just about that mountain and the experience on that mountain. Like even with a clock running, I have this awareness that the reason I bother to run a clock while I climb mountains is that added pressure of like pushing myself in these spaces is in the moment a more optimal subjective experience for me. Like I have it's a beyond ordinary, better than normal experience for me to be climbing up the side of a mountain, scaling it as efficiently and quickly as possible. Like I love that. And so just to be present, knowing like I'm doing something that I'm completely in love with in those moments. And yeah, it's part of this bigger process that's going to lead me to some like big perceived goal, but really I'm just doing a bunch of these little things that I love all along the way. And I do think that being in love with the lifestyle, right? Because someone else could go be like, oh, I'm going to go beat his record on these 100 peaks and have a terrible time the entire time and finish it and be like, that sucked. Why would I do that again? And completely hate the lifestyle it creates. That's not what you want. Like the whole reason I do this is because it increases that perception of my own living to be beyond ordinary.
Absolutely. So moving to my next question, Jason, if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
A question of the ages. What would I have to say to myself? I would tell myself to keep believing. I would tell myself that the work is worth it, that the suffering is worth it, that learning to suffer well is worth it. I would let myself know that I'm going to get my pain cave decorated really well. That's a little inside joke I have, that I've gone to the pain cave so much that it's decorated now. Just this idea that the effort over time is worth it. And I think I kind of already knew it as a kid, which is why I was able to sustain this. Behind me, you can see, for those that can't see this video feed, I've got a wall with 148 different bib numbers and some plaques that I've been given and finishers medals and awards and whatnot. And I have this plaque from 2007 that my cross country coach gave me as I graduated high school. And on it, the word she chose to describe me is dedicated. And I think I've been continuing to attempt to live out what that word might mean in its highest value, the highest sense of the word, if you will. And to know that process and the belief in that process has been worth it. I guess that's what I want to pass on to myself more than anything. It's just like, stay the course, put in the time. Even when it seems like the amount of effort required is tremendous, it's worth it.
Amazing. Who are your three most influential people in your life and how did they impact you?
I'll pick an easy low-hanging fruit here. When I was really young, I was very much into the story of Steve Prefontaine, American distance runner from the what was it, 1970s, I believe, who just had this style of running in the front and going hard from the gun and winning it from the gun to the finish. And I just loved that story of just being all in and persevering and suffering, and that it was about like guts and hard work and not about just like making a strategic kick at the end. And that message resonated with me. So that was kind of an idol, if you will, growing up. I probably watched the movie about him like 1,000 times as a kid. other people that have been influential to me. I had a mentor as a kid that helped me stay vulnerable and real. His name was Josh Bailey. He, someone who I could really open up to, and not put up the facade, not put up the like self-protective, like I'm cool and I'm going to hide behind this mask kind of vibes, but to just be raw and real and be myself. And I think that was huge. I think it's really easy as a young person to lose yourself behind that facade and that charade that you put up for what other people think of you. And to be able to work through some of that at such a young age, before I'd even really built it that much, I think helped me chart my course for who I am today, and to have the time to build myself to be who I am today, as opposed to just now finally maybe being able to tear that down. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at those two.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. As you know, Jason, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire people to achieve greatness and enhance their personal well-being. So what is your definition of greatness?
My definition of greatness, to boil it down into something I can say in the mic right now to you, I think greatness comes along the lines, I think we have to take into account that, like, perhaps there isn't an objective greatness, right? I think our own subjective experience is often lost to us, that we think we have to do something great on this big, grand external scale where the world rewards us for doing something. And I think greatness comes in its truest form when we're able to find the things we're authentically drawn to and pursue them with 100% commitment, and be proud of ourselves because of the life we're living, to both enjoy the life, but also to be proud of what we've done. And I think that to me is the essence of greatness, is to be able to live in that authentic experience, 100% committed and dedicated to the direction we care to go in our lives.
That's beautiful. Who is a future guest that you would like to see on this show?
Well, I mean, I would say maybe if Travis and Nathan go through with this 247 peak list, they might be a couple of rad young human beings to have on. I would say Sunny Stroher and Ashley Winchester are two ladies who they guide for all expeditions and all women's mountaineering guide company, and doing some super cool things mountaineering on high altitude peaks. They might be a couple cool people to talk to. Yeah, I think that would be my list of 4.
That's awesome. That's plenty. Where can our listeners go to connect with you online and check out your videos and check out your whole following, everything?
Absolutely. I have a website, jasonhardrath.com. You can contact me through there and see the sorts of things I'm trying to put out in the world, the good I'm trying to do. Also, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, mostly on Instagram though. I do actually respond to my DMs there if people wanted to try to get a hold of me. And then, yeah, I have a film coming out, Journey to 100. It's a short documentary just about this journey to 100 FKTs and the climbing of the 100 mountains for the Bulger's List, and a little bit of my story and message conveyed through it. And that's going to be coming out through Athletic Brewing in February. And it'll be traveling around in some film festivals. So if you get in touch with me on Instagram, you'll be able to see some of those film festival showings that are traveling around the country. Yeah, those would be the ways. And I'll make sure you have a link to the trailer for that documentary.
Well, thanks so much. I will be sure to have that in the podcast notes so all my listeners know where to go. But most importantly, I want to take the time to really thank you for being here today. Thank you for, I know you're a busy physical educator. This is your lunch break today, but just showing how passionate you are, whether it's inside or outside the classroom, to inspire people. And whether that's through climbing, whether that's through documenting, online, or whether that's through speaking like right now. I really, really appreciate your time today, and I'm sure my listeners do too. So thanks again for being here today. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Ben, it has absolutely been a pleasure. And yeah, thank you for offering me an opportunity to be able to put some of my story out there, put what I care about out there, and have the hope that I'll be able to inspire a few more. You bothering to put the time in to build this podcast and to edit this podcast and to put it out in the world, like it gives people like me places to speak into the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review.